Hey everyone, thanks for being here. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're all listening from. Go ahead and drop your city in the comments below. It's comforting to know I'm not just talking into the void, sharing this with people who might just understand. The applause was a physical thing, a wave of sound that washed over the auditorium and crashed against me without leaving a drop of its warmth. It felt like static, a dull, meaningless roar in my ears that had nothing to do with me. I stood on that stage, the velvet of the master's hood heavy on my shoulders, my diploma clutched in a hand that felt strangely numb, disconnected from my body. I was officially Joanna Hart, Master of Organizational Psychology. It was the culmination of 6 years of relentless work, of late nights fueled by cheap, bitter coffee and the flickering glow of a laptop screen. It was a mountain of student loans I'd taken on myself, a future I had single-handedly built. It was supposed to be the proudest, most triumphant day of my life. But my eyes weren't on the cheering crowd or the beaming faces of the faculty. They were fixed, as if by a magnetic force, on 3 empty chairs in the 3rd row, Section C, seats 12, 13, and 14. They were marked with little white, elegantly lettered cards that read, "Reserved for the family of Joanna Hart." The emptiness of those chairs was louder than the entire auditorium. They were a black hole, a void that was sucking all the joy, color, and sound out of the moment, leaving behind a cold, silent vacuum where my heart was supposed to be. My mother, Eleanor, my father, Robert, and my younger sister, Chloe, they weren't there. My mind, a traitor seeking the source of its own pain, drifted back to the phone call from a week ago. I was in my tiny studio apartment in Denver, a space that felt more like a book-lined fortress than a home, surrounded by half-packed boxes for my upcoming move to Seattle for the job I had fought so hard to get. My graduation gown hung on the back of the door, a shimmering black promise of the day to come. My phone had rung, and Mom's picture popped up, a perfectly curated selfie of her and Chloe, their heads tilted at the exact same angle, their smiles bright and practiced. "Hi, Mom," I'd said, my voice bright with an anticipation I should have known better than to feel. After all these years, you'd think I would have learned. "Joanna, honey," she'd started, her voice as smooth and sweet as warm honey. It was her preamble voice, the one she used right before delivering bad news or asking for a favor that was always presented as a non-negotiable opportunity for me to prove my worth. "Listen, about next Saturday, there's a little scheduling conflict." I felt a familiar cold stone drop into the pit of my stomach, a sensation I'd known since childhood. "What kind of conflict?" I asked, already knowing the answer, already bracing for the inevitable disappointment. "Well, Chloe's senior prom is the same night," she'd said, her tone breezy, as if this were a minor, amusing coincidence, as if I hadn't sent them the graduation schedule the very day I received it 6 months ago. And it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing for her, her very last high school dance. It's a really big deal for a young girl, a core memory. "My master's graduation is also a once-in-a-lifetime thing," I'd replied, my voice quieter than I intended, the words feeling futile even as I spoke them. There was a sigh on the other end, a gust of manufactured patience designed to make me feel small and difficult. "Don't be dramatic, Joanna. You've had graduations before. High school, your bachelor's. Chloe has never had a senior prom. We have to be there for her. Getting ready, the pictures. You know how important the pictures are for her scrapbook, for the family memory." For her Facebook wall, I thought. I did know. I knew that my mother's social media presence was a carefully constructed shrine to my sister's charmed, beautiful life. Every ballet recital, every soccer trophy, every school dance was documented with a level of enthusiasm and detail usually reserved for royal weddings. My own achievements, Dean's List announcements, scholarships, the very degree I was about to receive rarely made the cut. They were too abstract, not as photogenic as Chloe in a pretty dress. I heard my father's muffled voice in the background, the familiar sound of his peacemaking. Then he was on the line. Liv, he'd said, using my childhood nickname. It felt like a weapon, a soft-edged tool to disarm me. Your mother's right. It's important for Chloe. Let's not make this a fight. Let's not make this a fight. That was my father's life motto. It was the white flag he waved to excuse his own spinelessness, his passive agreement to every one of my mother's whims. It was always easier to sacrifice my feelings than to endure her displeasure. The call ended with a breezy, "We'll celebrate with you later, sweetie. We'll take you to dinner next week," from my mother. But there was no real promise in it. There never was. A dean with a kind face called my name. I walked across the stage in a daze, shook a stranger's hand, and accepted the rolled-up piece of paper that represented my future. The camera flashed, capturing a smile I didn't feel, a brittle facade for the photo album I knew would never be made. As I walked back to my seat, my gaze fell on those 3 empty chairs again, and in that moment, the static in my ears finally faded, replaced by a cold, ringing clarity. Something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching and accommodating for 28 long years, finally, irrevocably snapped. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a silent, clean break. Thank you guys so much for being here. It means a lot to share this. Seriously, let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to see it. The post-graduation reception was an exercise in quiet torture. It was a blur of happy, noisy families. Parents were clutching their robed children in fierce hugs, taking endless pictures, their faces beaming with a raw, unadulterated pride that felt like it belonged to a different species. I saw a father lift his daughter, hood and all, into the air, spinning her around as she laughed. I saw a mother weeping silently, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue as her son showed her his diploma. It was all so genuine, so heartfelt, and it made the emptiness in my own chest feel cavernous. I made my excuses early, muttering a lie about a dinner reservation to a classmate. The lie tasted like ash and self-pity in my mouth. The truth was, I just wanted to go home. Home was a third-floor walk-up with a view of a graffiti-covered brick wall, but it was mine. It was the sanctuary I had carved out for myself, paid for with years of waitressing, tutoring, and freelance research projects. It was the only place in the world where I didn't have to be anyone's sister or daughter, just me. I peeled off the heavy cap and gown, letting them fall into a heap on the floor like a shed skin. I felt 100 pounds lighter without them. I sat on my worn-out sofa, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me, amplifying the ringing in my ears. I waited for a text, a call, a simple 2-word message. Congratulations. The minutes ticked by, stretching into an hour, then 2. My phone remained dark and silent. It was a solid black rectangle of indifference. It was as if the most significant academic achievement of my life hadn't happened at all, a tree falling in a forest with no one around to hear it. Out of a morbid curiosity I couldn't resist, a self-destructive urge to poke at the wound, I opened Facebook, and there it was. My mother's page was the first thing in my feed, as if the algorithm itself wanted me to see. She had just posted a new album, uploaded a mere 20 minutes ago. The title, in a cheerful, bubbly font, was My Baby Girl's Magical Prom Night. The first picture was of Chloe. She was standing in our family's perfectly manicured garden, a riot of pink roses framing her like a portrait. She was wearing a silver sequined dress that must have cost more than my first car. It shimmered and sparkled under the setting sun, making her look like a genuine movie star. Her blonde hair was swept up in an intricate style that must have taken hours, and her makeup was flawless. She was objectively beautiful, and for a fleeting, painful second, I felt a pang of sisterly pride before it was drowned in a tidal wave of bitterness. Then I scrolled. The album was a masterpiece of curated family bliss. There was a photo of Mom pinning a corsage of white orchids on Chloe's wrist, both of them beaming at the camera with identical, brilliant smiles. There was one of Dad looking uncharacteristically emotional and proud as he hugged her. There were dozens more, Chloe laughing with her equally glamorous friends, Chloe looking adoringly at her handsome date, Liam, Chloe stepping into a gleaming white stretch limousine that was ostentatious even for our neighborhood. And then there was the caption. My mother hadn't just written a caption, she'd written a eulogy to her own perceived success as a parent. So incredibly proud of my baby girl Chloe, it began. Watching you get ready for your senior prom has been one of the greatest joys of my life. You are as beautiful on the inside as you are on the outside, and you deserve a night that is as magical as you are. Have the time of your life, my sweet girl. We love you to the moon and back. I read the words over and over, letting them burn themselves into my memory. Incredibly proud. Greatest joys. Magical. Not a single word about me. Not a single post, not a single story, not a single acknowledgement of the daughter who had just earned a master's degree against considerable odds. It was as if I didn't exist. I was a ghost in my own family, my accomplishments invisible because they didn't come with a sparkly dress and a limousine. My finger hovered over the comments, a form of digital self-harm. They were already flooding in from aunts, cousins, my mother's friends. Stunning! A true princess! Have a blast, Chloe. You deserve it. Eleanor, she gets her beauty from you, like mother, like daughter. It was a public chorus of adoration, a spectacle of my family's perfect life. A life in which I was apparently just a footnote, an inconvenient obligation they'd skillfully managed to avoid for the evening. I closed the app, my thumb pressing so hard on the screen I thought it might crack. The hurt was a physical thing, a tight, brutal band around my chest that made it hard to breathe. I wasn't just forgotten, I was deliberately, publicly erased. And the worst part was, this wasn't new. It was just the boldest, most public erasure yet. I had always been the practical one, the responsible one, the one who worked hard in the shadows while Chloe danced in the spotlight. I was the foundation, she was the facade. And tonight, they had made it perfectly, painfully clear which one they valued more. The silence from my phone wasn't an oversight. It was a statement. I must have fallen into a fitful, dreamless sleep on the couch because I woke up to the jarring buzz of my phone vibrating against the wooden coffee table. The screen glowed in the dark apartment, a malevolent little rectangle of light. It was 11:47 p.m. The message was from my mother. For a foolish, hopeful second, my heart performed a painful leap in my chest. Maybe this is it. Maybe now that the prom festivities were winding down, now that the pictures were taken and uploaded and admired, she'd remembered she had another daughter. Maybe her conscience had kicked in. Maybe this was the congratulations I had been waiting for all day, a late but welcome acknowledgement. My hands were unsteady as I unlocked the phone. The message wasn't a congratulation. It wasn't an apology. It was an invoice. Joanna, I need you to send $2,000 to my account. The final payment for the limo and some of the party planner's extras are due tomorrow morning. Thanks. I stared at the screen, reading the words again and again, convinced that my sleep-addled brain had to be misinterpreting them. But the words remained, stark and cold. There was no greeting, no hope you had a good day, No acknowledgement of the giant gaping hole their absence had left in what should have been my celebration. Just a cold transactional demand for money. $2,000. The casual entitlement of it all, the sheer audacity made me feel dizzy. The thanks at the end was the most insulting part, as if my compliance was a foregone conclusion. My thumbs began to shake, not with weakness, but with a burgeoning rage as I typed a reply. You skipped my graduation, the most important day of my adult life, and this is the first thing you send me? Are you serious? The three little dots, the sign that she was typing, appeared almost instantly. I held my breath, a tiny, stupid, masochistic part of me still hoping for a flicker of remorse, a hint of shame. Her reply came through, a torpedo of expertly crafted guilt tripping. Don't make this about you. It was Chloe's big night. We talked about this. Family helps family. This is an expensive event, and we could use the help. You're the one with the big new salary from that fancy Seattle job after all. Don't make this about you. The words hit me with the force of a physical slap. My graduation day, a milestone I had worked toward for years, and I wasn't allowed to make it about me? My whole life, I wasn't allowed to make it about me. It was always about Chloe's needs, Chloe's feelings, Mom's social image, Dad's desperate desire for peace at any price. My role, I saw with blinding clarity, was to be the provider, the silent benefactor, the background character who funded the main story and then was expected to applaud from the wings. Family helps family. The phrase echoed in my head, a poisonous mantra. It was her favorite weapon, a crowbar she used to pry open my wallet and my boundaries. Family helps family, which is why I'd worked a grueling summer job at 15 to pay for Chloe's braces. Family helps family, which is why my college savings had been borrowed from, a loan never repaid, for a down payment on a new car for Chloe when she turned 16. Family helps family, which is why I was now expected to foot the bill for an extravagant party I wasn't even invited to, on a day they had deliberately and cruelly ignored me. The deep, aching hurt that had been sitting in my chest all day began to curdle, transforming into something else entirely. It was a cold, hard, clarifying rage that burned away all the fog of obligation and guilt. The years of being taken for granted, of my successes being minimized while my resources were drained, all coalesced into this one incredibly audacious text message. This was the snap. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, internal shift in the tectonic plates of my soul. The part of me that had always craved their approval, that had bent over backwards to earn a single, grudging, "we're proud of you," simply died. It withered on the vine and turned to dust. In its place grew something new, a chilling, strategic calm. I was done. I was done being the good daughter. I was done being the understanding sister. I was done being the family ATM. My mother was right about one thing. Family helps family. But they had stopped treating me like family the moment they chose a high school dance over my future. They had made their choice. Now, I was going to make mine. I wasn't just going to say no. I was going to build a fortress of financial and emotional independence so high and so strong they could never breach its walls again. The planning started right then, in the dark of my apartment, with the cold glow of her text message illuminating my face. The tears stopped. The strategy began. The cloying smell of burnt sugar and the earthy tang of yeast always takes me back to my junior year of high school. It's a strange, visceral trigger, but that's the year I spent every weekend and most weeknights working at the Daily Need, our local bakery. I wasn't saving for a car or for college, not for myself. I was saving for Chloe's first prom dress. She was a freshman, a social butterfly even then, and a popular senior had asked her to his prom. My mother was ecstatic. To her, this wasn't just a date. It was a social victory, a testament to her success in raising a desirable daughter. The problem was the dress. Chloe, with her unerring taste for the expensive, had fallen in love with a pale blue, off-the-shoulder number in the window of a fancy downtown boutique. It cost $400. In our world, that might as well have been $4,000. "We just can't swing that right now, sweetie," my mother had told Chloe, her voice thick with theatrical sympathy. She hugged Chloe, stroking her hair. Then, over Chloe's shoulder, her eyes had found me, sitting at the kitchen table trying to study for a chemistry final. She gave me a familiar, calculating look, a look that assessed my resources and my pliability. "Joanna, you're still working at the bakery, right? You're always so good with money." It wasn't a question. It was a directive, gift-wrapped in a backhanded compliment. It was a strategic deployment of her older, more responsible daughter. "Mom, I have a big test next week. I can't pick up more shifts," I had argued weakly. She just smiled, a tight, unyielding expression. "And Chloe has a big memory to make, a night she'll remember for the rest of her life. Your sister needs you. That's what good sisters do." A week later, I was picking up every extra shift they would give me. My hands were perpetually dusted with flour, my hair always smelled faintly of sourdough, and my chemistry grade slipped from an A to a B. I would come home late at night, my feet aching and my body exhausted, and see the gossamer blue dress hanging on the back of Chloe's door like a trophy I had won for her. She would prance around in it while my mother clapped and took pictures with her phone. "You're such a good sister, Joanna," my mother would say, not looking at me but at Chloe's radiant reflection in the mirror. The praise felt hollow, like a receipt for a transaction. I had provided the funds, so I was given a token of appreciation to ensure future cooperation. I remembered the night of that prom with a painful clarity. I helped Chloe with her hair, my fingers, more accustomed to kneading dough, fumbling with the bobby pins. I fastened the delicate clasp of a necklace that had once been our grandmother's, a beautiful, simple pearl locket I had always loved, but which Mom insisted looked better on Chloe's delicate neckline. As she walked out the door, a perfect princess in her $400 dress, I stood on the porch in my flour-dusted jeans and worn-out sneakers. I'd had to miss my own best friend's sweet 16 party because I was scheduled for the closing shift at the bakery. There was no choice in the matter. My mother hugged Chloe tightly, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle. Then she turned to me as her date's car pulled away. "Don't forget to take out the trash and recycling before you leave for work," she'd said, her mind already on to the next domestic task. Then she went back inside, leaving me alone on the porch. That memory, so sharp and clear, surfaced now as I sat on my couch, the demand for $2,000 burning on my phone screen. It wasn't just about the money. It never was. It was about the ingrained, accepted pattern of my servitude. It was a decade of being the behind-the-scenes support crew for The Chloe Show, a production directed and produced by our mother. I was the reliable, invisible workhorse. My labor, my time, my money, they were all resources to be deployed for the benefit of the family's star player, the one who brought home the social accolades. This time, the price tag was higher. $2,000. It was more than my monthly rent. It was the money I had carefully earmarked for the security deposit and first month's rent on my new apartment in Seattle. It was my escape fund, my fresh start. And my mother was trying to snatch it away for another night of glitter and photos, another chapter in the scrapbook of Chloe's perfect life. The bitterness of that old memory solidified my resolve into something diamond hard. The tired girl who worked in the bakery was done. The woman with a master's degree was finished. I had paid my dues. I had bought the dresses, funded the trips, and patched up the financial messes. I had paid for my role in this family over and over again. And what had I gotten in return? 3 empty chairs and a demand for more. That night, thinking of my younger self covered in flour and exhaustion, I made a solemn promise to her. I would not let them take one more dollar. I would not let them take one more piece of my future. The pattern of sacrifice was going to end tonight. A dark, ugly thought began to crawl into my mind, a poisonous vine twisting around my anger. My mother's demand for $2,000 was for extras and a final payment. That choice of words was specific. It implied that other, larger payments had already been made. Where had that money come from? My parents lived comfortably, but they weren't wealthy. My father was a cautious man, a meticulous budgeter. He wouldn't never approve of such lavish spending on a high school dance. He would call it financially irresponsible. So how had my mother managed it behind his back? Then, a sudden, sickening realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The college fund. When I was a senior in high school, my academic mentor, a wonderful retired history professor named Dr. Evelyn Reed, had passed away. She had been a surrogate grandmother to me, a champion of my education. In her will, she had left me a modest educational trust fund as a form of inheritance. It wasn't a life-changing fortune, but it was enough to cover my master's degree expenses without loans and leave a little left over for my future, a down payment on a home, a safety net. It was a sacred gift. She had set it up so that my mother was a co-signer on the account, a practical measure since I was only 17 at the time. I was 28 now, but I'd never gotten around to formally removing her name. It just never seemed necessary. We rarely touched the money, and despite everything, I had clung to the naive belief that my mother would never cross that particular line. It was a stupid, catastrophically naive oversight. My hands trembled as I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table, my fingers fumbling with the keys. I logged into my online banking portal, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape. I clicked on the account named the Reed Educational Trust. The balance that appeared on the screen made the air leave my lungs in a painful rush. It was thousands of dollars lower than it should have been. With a sense of dread, I clicked on View Statements. The page loaded, a clinical grid of dates and numbers, and there it was, a history of her betrayal, documented in cold, hard digital ink. A series of large withdrawals over the past 2 months. The first one, dated 8 weeks ago, a charge for $900. The merchant name was Plaza Hotel Catering. My mind flashed to Chloe's excited chatter about the fancy food they were having at prom. The next, 6 weeks ago, $600 to something called Emerald Gown Boutique. I pictured Chloe trying on the shimmering silver dress, my mother at her side, swiping a card linked to my future. Then, a month ago, a cluster of charges. $400 to Beauty Lounge for hair and makeup trials, another $500 to an event rental company for a photo booth. It was all there, in black and white. She hadn't just been planning to ask me for money, she had already been taking it. She had been secretly, systematically draining my inheritance, the money a kind woman had left to secure my future, to fund my sister's extravagant, picture-perfect prom night. The dress, the catering, the venue, it was all being paid for with my money. My money. I imagined her standing in that boutique, telling the cashier what a wonderful, magical night her daughter was going to have, all while committing a profound act of financial violence against her other daughter. The betrayal was so deep, so profoundly intimate, it left me breathless. This wasn't just entitlement, this was theft. It was a calculated, deliberate violation of my trust, my future, and the memory of a woman I revered. She had been lying to me for months, with every cheerful phone call and every casual conversation, all while planning this grand event on my dime. The demand for $2,000 wasn't just an additional request, it was the final, arrogant nail in the coffin. She must have hit the account limit, or perhaps she just got greedy. She thought I'd never notice, or if I did, that I'd be too timid, too beaten down by years of conditioning to do anything about it. She thought I would just fall in line, like I always did. I felt a volcanic rage building inside me, so hot and pure it burned away any remaining sadness or self-pity. She had crossed a line from which there was absolutely no return. This wasn't just about toxic family dynamics anymore. This was a legal matter. My mind went into overdrive, the emotional part shutting down and the logical, strategic part taking over. I began taking screenshots of the statements. I downloaded the PDF files for the last 6 months of activity. I highlighted every unauthorized transaction in bright, angry red. I was no longer a grieving daughter. I was a prosecutor, an investigator, an auditor, building an airtight case. I was gathering my receipts, both literally and figuratively. And I knew, with absolute, unshakable certainty, what my next step had to be. She had used a legal loophole to take what was mine. Now, I would use the full force of the law and the banking system to take it all back. The next morning, the sun streamed through my window, but I felt none of its warmth. I felt cold, clear, and utterly focused. I didn't call my mother back. I didn't reply to her increasingly frantic texts. My first call, at precisely 8:01 a.m., was to Mr. Chen. He had been Dr. Reed's lawyer and had helped set up the trust all those years ago. He was a kind, no-nonsense man in his late 60s who had always treated me with a respect my own family rarely did. "Joanna," he said, his voice warm with genuine pleasure, "I was so pleased to hear about your graduation. Your mentor would have been immensely proud. Congratulations." His simple words of acknowledgement from a near stranger almost made me cry. It was the validation I had been craving from my own parents. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I appreciate that more than you know," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. I cleared my throat. "I'm calling about the Reed Trust. I have a few questions about my legal rights regarding the account's governance." I explained the situation calmly and factually, laying out the timeline of the withdrawals and my mother's subsequent demand for more money. I kept my voice steady, relating the facts as if I were presenting a case study, not the story of my own family's betrayal. I could hear him typing on his keyboard, the rhythmic clicking a comforting sound of professionalism. "I see," he said after a moment of silence. "Joanna, when Dr. Reed set up this trust, the co-signer provision was a standard protective measure for a minor. However, the moment you turned 18, you gained sole legal authority over those funds. Your mother's name remaining on the account was a legacy permission, a courtesy that you had every right to revoke at any time. Legally speaking, as the sole adult beneficiary, any withdrawal she made without your explicit, documented consent could be considered misappropriation of funds." The words misappropriation of funds echoed in my ears. It was a clean, legal term for stealing. It stripped away all the messy family emotions and left only the cold, hard fact of the crime. "So what can I do?" I asked, my own resolve hardening with his words. "Your first step is to contact the bank immediately," he advised, his tone shifting from sympathetic to strategic. "Inform them that you are the sole legal authority for the account and wish to revoke all access for any other individual, effective immediately. Change the passwords. Request new account numbers if you feel it's necessary. You are in complete control here. You are not just a daughter in this situation. You are the sole trustee of a legal instrument. Act like one. He paused. Joanna, I'm very sorry you're having to deal with this. Dr. Reed wanted that money to secure your future, not to fund a high school party. My second call was to the bank. After navigating the automated menu, I was connected to a fraud department specialist named Sarah. I explained the situation again, this time with even more precision, armed with the legal terminology Mr. Chen had given me. I gave her the dates and exact amounts of the unauthorized transactions. Ma'am, I am so sorry to hear this is happening with your family, Sarah said, her voice dripping with a practiced, professional empathy that I found surprisingly comforting. It was impartial. We can take care of this immediately. I can see here that you are the primary and sole beneficiary. We can lock down the account and revoke Eleanor Hart's access right now. It will take effect instantly. Any debit cards linked to her name will be deactivated, and any pre-authorized payments scheduled from this point forward will be canceled. Please do it, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. And I need one more thing. Can you please send me an official email on bank letterhead confirming that I, Joanna Hart, as the sole authority on this account, have revoked all access and payment permissions for Eleanor Hart, effective today at this time? Of course, Sarah said. Standard procedure. You'll have it in your inbox within 5 minutes. As I hung up the phone, I felt a powerful surge of adrenaline, of control. The email from the bank arrived moments later, a formal, indisputable legal document. I saved it as a PDF and printed a hard copy. I now had my evidence. I had my legal standing. I had my weapon. I looked at the text message my mother had sent last night, the one still sitting unanswered on my screen. I thought about composing a long, angry reply, detailing her theft and my pain, but I realized that would be a waste of energy. She didn't deserve an explanation. She didn't deserve my anger. She deserved nothing but the consequences of her own actions. My fingers moved over the keyboard, typing a single, final response. I took a deep breath, held it for a beat, and typed my reply to her long, demanding text from the night before. 1 word, 2 letters, a complete sentence. No. I hit send. The blue message bubble popped up on my screen, a small, quiet act of rebellion that felt bigger and more explosive than a declaration of war. For the first time in my 28 years, I hadn't explained myself. I hadn't justified my decision. I hadn't softened the blow. I hadn't apologized for my own boundaries. I had simply stated them. The response was instantaneous, as if she had been sitting there holding her phone, just waiting for the funds to transfer. My phone began to vibrate violently on the table, my mother's name and picture flashing on the screen. I stared at it, then deliberately pressed the silence button on the side of the phone. The vibrations stopped. Then came the barrage of texts, a rapid-fire assault of manipulation. What do you mean, no? Don't be ridiculous, Joanna. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. This is important. I am your mother. You do not say no to me. Did you hear me? Chloe will be absolutely devastated. Is that what you want? To ruin your sister's most special night over a little bit of money? How could you be so selfish? I can't believe how ungrateful you've become. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By spitting in our faces? I read each message with a strange clinical detachment. The words that once would have sent me spiraling into a vortex of guilt and self-doubt now seemed pathetic and transparent. They were the predictable button-pushing of a lifelong manipulator who had just discovered her remote control was broken. Ungrateful? The irony was breathtaking. What exactly was I supposed to be grateful for? For being ignored on my graduation day? For having my inheritance treated like her personal slush fund? For a childhood spent as a supporting character in my own family? I didn't reply. My silence seemed to infuriate her more than any argument could have. She was used to engagement, to a fight she knew how to win. She had no strategy for a complete lack of response. An hour later, a call came from my father. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left was a masterclass in passive, enabling cowardice. Liv, his voice was weary, strained, the sound of a man who just wanted a quiet life. Your mother's very, very upset. You know how she gets. Just call her, smooth things over. It's just money after all. Let's not make this a fight. We're family. It's just money. The phrase made my blood run cold. It was so easy for him to say. It wasn't his money. It wasn't his future being casually spent on sequins and champagne. His plea for peace wasn't noble. It was the most profound form of selfishness. He would rather I be robbed blind than have to deal with my mother's temper. The realization was as disappointing as it was predictable. He wasn't a protector. He was her accomplice, the silent partner in her emotional tyranny. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, cutting off the stream of angry, manipulative, and pleading messages. A profound sense of calm, of quiet power washed over me. I had cut the cord. For years, I had been tethered to them by a twisted sense of obligation and a desperate, childish need for their love. Now I realized that the rope was a chain, and I had just taken a pair of bolt cutters to it. I thought my single word, no, was the end of the conversation. I believed that by cutting off her access to my money, I had won. But I was severely underestimating the sheer force of my mother's arrogance and her profound, unshakable belief that she was entitled to whatever she wanted from whomever she wanted. The fight wasn't over. She was just getting started. And her next move would be more drastic, more final than I could have ever imagined. For 2 days, there was a heavy, loaded silence from their end. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm, the eerie calm when the pressure drops and the sky turns a strange color. I half expected my parents to just show up at my apartment door, ready for an in-person ambush, a tactic my mother had used before. I spent the time preparing, both emotionally and practically. I continued packing my books, sorting through my clothes for the move to Seattle, and solidifying the logistics for my new life. Each packed box felt like another brick in the fortress I was building around myself. With each item I placed in a box, I felt like I was shedding a piece of my old life, my old self. The storm finally broke on the 3rd day. It was the afternoon of Chloe's prom, a fact I was keenly aware of. My phone buzzed on the counter, startling me. I saw it was a text message from my mother. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen, before my resolve hardened. I needed to see it through. I opened it. The message was not a plea. It was not an argument. It was a proclamation, delivered with the cold finality of a judge's sentence. Since you have made it clear that you care more about money than your own family, you are no longer a part of it. We are done with you. All of your things that are still in this house will be in boxes on the porch. Don't contact us again. You're disowned. I read the word disowned. It was so dramatic, so theatrical, so quintessentially my mother. It was the nuclear option, the ultimate punishment a parent can wield against a child. 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, those words would have shattered me into a million pieces. They would have sent me crawling back, sobbing, begging for forgiveness, promising to do anything to be let back into the family fold. I would have sent the money, and then some, just to hear her say she didn't mean it. But now, as I read the text in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by the boxes that represented my future, I felt nothing. No, that's not right. I felt something. It was a profound, shocking, and overwhelming sense of relief. It was like 100-pound weight I didn't even realize I was still carrying had been vaporized from my shoulders. She thought she was punishing me. She thought she was taking something precious away from me, the privilege of being her daughter, of belonging to our family. But what she had actually done, in her blind rage and arrogance, was set me free. She had given me a gift I would never have been brave enough to take for myself, an official, written release from all future obligation. She had drawn the line in the sand, not me. She had been the one to formally sever the ties. I was no longer the ungrateful daughter who said no. I was the disowned one, and there was a strange, unassailable power in that. I had not abandoned my family. My family, by their own dramatic declaration, had abandoned me. With steady hands, I took a screenshot of the text message. I saved it to a secure folder on my cloud drive, right next to the bank statements and the official email from the bank. It was the final piece of my collection, the final receipt, the capstone on my argument. My mother, in her hubris, believed she held all the cards. She thought that by disowning me, she had ended the game and declared herself the winner. She had no idea that she had just handed me the trump card. She thought it was over. She assumed I would now just slink away into my new life, defeated, shamed, and alone. But she didn't know the new me. The old Joanna would have cried. The old Joanna would have accepted her fate and disappeared. But the new Joanna, the one forged in the fire of betrayal and disappointment, had other plans. The game wasn't over. The final confrontation was yet to come, and it wouldn't be in a text message or a tearful phone call. It would be in person, on her turf, on the very night that she had sacrificed her own daughter for. I looked at the clock. The prom would be starting in a few hours. I knew exactly where I needed to be. I chose my outfit with the care of a general selecting armor for a decisive battle. It wasn't a revenge dress, nothing flashy or attention-seeking. That was my mother's style, not mine. I chose a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue pantsuit. The fabric was heavy, the lines were clean and sharp. It was professional, understated, and it made me feel grounded and powerful. It was the uniform of the woman I was becoming, not the girl I had been. My hair was pulled back in a neat, severe bun, and my makeup was minimal, businesslike. I didn't want to look emotional. I wanted to look like a woman who meant business. In my leather handbag, I placed a slim file folder. It was my entire arsenal. Inside was a printed copy of the bank statement with the unauthorized charges highlighted in fluorescent yellow, the official email from the bank on their letterhead confirming Eleanor Hart's access had been revoked at my request, and a crisp printout of the final text message, "You're disowned." Each paper felt heavy with significance. I drove to the Denver Plaza, the city's most luxurious and historic hotel. The grand ballroom had been rented out for the Northwood High School senior prom. As I pulled into the parking garage, I saw the limousines and party buses lined up outside, disgorging flocks of excited teenagers in their glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. They were so young, so full of hope, their laughter echoing in the concrete structure. It was a scene of pure, youthful extravagance, and it felt a world away from the cold mission I was on. I didn't go into the hotel right away. My plan required patience and precise timing. Instead, I went to the small, chic cafe across the street. I took a table by the window, one that gave me a perfect, unobstructed view of the hotel's grand, chandelier-lit entrance. I ordered a black coffee, its bitterness a welcome companion to my mood, and I waited. About 30 minutes later, I saw them. My father's black sedan pulled up to the curb. He got out first, looking stiff and uncomfortable in his rented-looking suit. Then my mother emerged from the passenger side. She was wearing a floor-length, shimmering gold dress, as if she were attending the Oscars, not chaperoning a high school dance. She surveyed the scene with the proprietary air of a queen overseeing her court, a smug smile playing on her lips. Finally, Chloe stepped out. I had to admit, even with the anger curdling in my stomach, she looked breathtaking. The silver dress I had seen in the pictures was even more dazzling in person, catching the light with every movement. But seeing it now, knowing it was bought with my stolen inheritance, knowing its true cost, filled me with a righteous, cold fury. They were all smiles, posing for the pictures my father took with his phone. They looked like the perfect, happy, successful American family. A complete and utter fabrication, a beautiful lie funded by my future. They swept into the hotel, oblivious to my presence just 100 feet away, my mother laughing at something my father said. I watched them go, my hand resting on the file folder in my bag. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I felt a sense of purpose I had never known before. This wasn't about revenge, not in the petty, emotional way my mother would understand. This was about truth. It was about consequences. My mother had built her entire world on a fragile foundation of appearances and my silent, unending sacrifice. Tonight, I was going to perform a structural integrity test. I was going to show everyone what her perfect world was really made of. I finished my coffee, the last dregs cold in the cup. I left a generous tip on the table, smoothed down the front of my jacket, took a deep, steadying breath, and walked out of the cafe. As I crossed the street and headed towards the grand entrance of the Denver Plaza, I felt like I was walking towards my own destiny. I was an uninvited guest at a party paid for in my name, and it was time to settle the bill. I entered the hotel lobby, a vast, intimidating expanse of polished marble floors and colossal crystal chandeliers. I could hear the muffled bass of the pop music coming from the ballroom down the long carpeted hall. I didn't head towards the music. Instead, I walked directly to the front desk. A young, polished man in a sharp hotel uniform looked up from his computer, his smile professionally bright. "Good evening, ma'am. How can I help you?" "I'm here regarding the Northwood High School prom event," I said calmly, my voice steady. "I need to speak with the event manager. My name is Joanna Hart." The name got his immediate attention. He tapped a few keys on his computer, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Of course, Miss Hart. We have you down as the primary client for the booking. Mr. Vance is expecting to settle the final account with you this evening." My heart gave a little leap of confirmation. Of course, the booking was under my name. My mother had used my account to make the initial deposit, so all the hotel records would list me as the responsible party. "Actually, there's been a slight change of plans," I said smoothly, letting a small, confidential smile touch my lips. "My mother, Eleanor Hart, will be handling the final payment tonight. But I would like to be present when she does, just to ensure it all goes smoothly. Could you possibly let me know when she comes to the event office to settle up?" "Certainly, Miss Hart," he said, giving me a curious but professional smile. "I'll keep an eye out." I found a discreet but comfortable armchair in a recessed corner of the lobby, one that gave me a clear view of the event coordinator's office down a short corridor. I sat, crossed my legs, and waited. It didn't take long. About an hour into the event, just as the main courses were likely being served, I saw the event manager, a harried-looking man in his 40s I presumed was Marcus Vance, approach my mother in the hallway outside the ballroom. I saw her nod, flash her most charming, disarming smile, and follow him toward the office. This was the moment. Showtime. I stood up, my movements deliberate and unhurried, and walked over. I arrived at the office door just as my mother was pulling a gold credit card from her designer wallet, poised to make the final, grand payment. "Ah, Miss Hart," Mr. Vance said, looking at me with some relief. "Glad you could join us. We were just about to settle the final balance." My mother froze, her hand hovering over the credit card machine. Her face, a mask of social grace just moments before, hardened into a venomous glare. "Joanna, what in the world are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice a low, dangerous whisper, meant for my ears only. "I believe you're settling the final bill for the event," I said, my voice deliberately normal, loud enough for Mr. Vance to hear clearly. She shot me a look that could curdle milk, then turned back to Mr. Vance with a brittle, fake laugh. "My daughter, always so responsible." She confidently inserted her card into the machine. Mr. Vance watched the small screen. After a moment, a small, troubled frown creased his forehead. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart," he said, his voice apologetic. "The card has been declined." "What?" My mother's voice was sharp, incredulous. "That's impossible. There must be a mistake with your machine. Run it again." He did. "I'm sorry," declined again. My mother's face was turning a blotchy, unattractive red beneath her expensive foundation. She fumbled in her purse, her movements jerky, and pulled out another card, this one a debit card linked to their joint account with my father. "Try this one," she snapped. Mr. Vance ran the second card. He shook his head slowly, looking more uncomfortable by the second. "Declined. The reason given is insufficient funds." The air in the small office was thick with a suffocating tension. My mother was staring at the machine as if it had personally betrayed her. The regal confidence was melting off her, revealing a rising, naked panic. She had been so sure of herself, so certain of her power and her resources. It had never, in a million years, occurred to her that the well might run dry. It had never occurred to her that I would or could fight back. "This is absolutely ridiculous," she stammered, her voice rising in pitch. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mom," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through her blustering. The moment I had been planning for, the moment I had been waiting for, had finally arrived. My mother whipped her head around to face me, her eyes blazing with a potent mixture of fury and dawning comprehension. "You," she spat, the single word dripping with venom. "You did this. You called the credit card companies. You canceled the cards." "I have no control over your credit cards, Mom," I replied, my voice dangerously calm, each word precise and deliberate. "But I have control over mine and my bank accounts." Mr. Vance was looking back and forth between us, his professional composure starting to fray. This was clearly escalating beyond a simple payment issue. The hotel's senior manager, a distinguished silver-haired gentleman named Mr. Davison, must have been alerted by his staff because he appeared at the office door, his expression one of calm authority. "Is there a problem here, Marcus?" Mr. Davison asked, his sharp eyes taking in the entire scene in a single glance. My mother's flushed face, Mr. Vance's discomfort, and my own quiet stillness. "We're having a significant issue with the final event payment, sir," Mr. Vance said, clearly relieved to have backup. "The client's cards are being declined." Mr. Davison stepped fully into the office, his gaze settling on my mother, then on me. "The primary booking for this event is under the name Joanna Hart," he said, looking at a sleek tablet in his hand. His voice was deep and commanded respect. "The initial deposit and all subsequent installment payments were made from an account bearing that name." He looked directly at me. "Are you Joanna Hart?" "I am," I said, my voice clear and strong. My mother let out a strangled, sputtering noise. "This is a private family matter," she insisted, trying to regain control. "My daughter is just being difficult and dramatic." "I'm afraid it has become a hotel matter, madam," Mr. Davison said, his tone polite but unyielding as steel. "The outstanding balance is significant. According to our records, the pre-authorized account for this final payment was the Reed Educational Trust account, also in Miss Joanna Hart's name. He looked down at his tablet again, then back up, his eyes locking with mine. However, we received an official, notarized email this morning directly from the account holder, Miss Hart, formally rescinding all payment authorizations for this event. We were legally obligated to comply. He looked at me for confirmation. I simply gave a short, firm nod. The last vestiges of color drained from my mother's face. She finally, completely understood. I hadn't just said no to her text message for more money. I had methodically and legally pulled the plug on the entire operation. The financial rug she was standing on had been woven from my resources, and I had just yanked it out from under her. "You wouldn't," she whispered, staring at me in horrified disbelief. "You would not humiliate your own sister, your own family like this." Humiliate her? My voice rose for the first time, laced with the ice of 1,000 injustices, echoing slightly in the small, silent office. "You want to talk about humiliation? How about the humiliation of sitting alone at my master's graduation, staring at 3 empty chairs while my family attends a high school dance? How about having my inheritance, money left to me by a woman who actually believed in my future, stolen piece by piece to pay for a party I wasn't even invited to?" My movements were sharp and precise as I opened the file folder. I laid the bank statement on the counter, the highlighted lines glowing like neon signs under the office lights. Emerald Gown Boutique, Plaza Hotel Catering, Beauty Lounge. All of it, Mom. You've been stealing from me for months. Eleanor stared at the paper, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Mr. Davison and Mr. Vance exchanged an uncomfortable but knowing glance. The truth was laid bare on the counter, an undeniable black and white indictment of her greed and deception. "Family helps family," she finally stammered, the words a weak, pathetic echo of her usual confident mantra. "No," I said, my voice ringing with the clarity of absolute finality. "Thieves steal, and I am done being robbed." The curtain on her perfect, imaginary world had just come crashing down, and there was no one left to applaud. "Thank you for staying with me through this. You are an amazing and patient person. Please, if you're still here, hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below so I know you've journeyed with me this far. Your support means more than you know." Comment with a 1 and let me tell you what happened next. The sound of the office door opening made us all turn. It was Chloe, looking like a fairy tale princess, her face a mask of youthful impatience and confusion. Her date, Liam, a tall, handsome boy in a well-fitting tux, stood awkwardly behind her. "Mom, what's taking so long?" she asked, her voice bright. "They're about to announce the prom king and queen, and everyone's waiting for you." Then she saw me, standing there in my severe pantsuit, a stark contrast to the festive atmosphere. "Joanna, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, my mother found her voice again, desperation making it shrill and ugly. She lunged at the only weapon she had left, casting herself as the victim. She pointed a trembling, accusing finger at me. "Your sister is trying to ruin your night, Chloe. She's canceled the payments for the prom. She's trying to humiliate you in front of all your friends because she's jealous." Chloe looked from my mother's frantic, contorted face to my calm, impassive one. The confusion in her eyes was slowly being replaced by a dawning, sickening horror. She had lived her entire life in a bubble of effortless privilege, insulated from the gritty mechanics and quiet sacrifices that had sustained it. But she wasn't stupid. She could feel the poisonous truth in the air. Her gaze dropped to the papers spread on the counter. Her eyes scanned the bank statement, her finger subconsciously tracing the line item from Emerald Gown Boutique. Her eyes widened. She looked down at her own glittering silver dress, then back at the piece of paper. The connection was immediate, undeniable. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. She looked at me, her blue eyes, so much like our mother's, wide with a question she was almost too afraid to ask. "Joanna?" I didn't need to say a word. I just met her gaze and held it. I didn't offer sympathy or condemnation. I just offered her the truth. She turned back to our mother, her fairy tale demeanor crumbling. "Mom," she said, her voice shaking now, the word an accusation. "Did you use her money? Is that how you paid for all of this? Did you lie to me?" My mother's face crumpled. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked from Chloe's horrified face to my resolute one, trapped in the web of her own deceit. Her silence was the most damning confession of all. Chloe took a stumbling step back, her hand flying to her mouth. The magical night, the perfect dress, the grand party, it was all a fraud, a beautiful illusion built on a foundation of theft. It was a gift not from her loving parents, but from the sister they had cast aside and robbed. The humiliation my mother had accused me of causing was nothing compared to the profound, soul-deep shame that was now washing over Chloe's face. This wasn't just about money. It was about the lie of her entire, cherished life. "How could you?" Chloe whispered, tears welling in her eyes, threatening to send black streaks of mascara down her perfectly powdered cheeks. "How could you do that to her? To me?" She turned on her mother with a ferocity I had never seen in her. "You lied to me. You let me think this was all for me, but it was just another part of your show." This wasn't how my mother had envisioned her triumphant night. She had expected to be the proud matriarch, the universally admired architect of her daughter's perfect memory. Instead, she was being confronted and condemned by both her children, her sins exposed under the harsh, unflattering fluorescent lights of a hotel office. My father chose that exact moment to appear at the door, drawn by the commotion. He saw my mother's defeated face, Chloe's tears, and my stoic expression. He saw the official-looking papers on the counter, and in typical, heartbreaking fashion, he said nothing. He just stood there, a silent, useless witness to the family he had allowed to implode through his own cowardice. I had done what I came to do. The truth was out. I looked at the wreckage of my family. My mother, exposed and pathetic. My sister, heartbroken by a betrayal that had implicated her. My father, a monument to inaction. And I felt no triumph, no joy. Just a quiet, final, and deeply sad sense of closure. I gathered my papers, placed them neatly back in the folder, turned, and walked out of the office without a single backward glance, leaving them to their ruin. I walked out of the Denver Plaza and didn't look back. The cool night air felt clean and sharp in my lungs, a welcome antidote to the toxic, suffocating atmosphere of the hotel. As I drove away, the city lights blurring through my windshield, I imagined the scene I had left behind. Mr. Davison, the hotel manager, politely but firmly demanding payment in full. My mother's utter humiliation as she tried to explain. My father having to make the frantic, shameful call to their bank, transferring money from their retirement savings to cover the extravagant bill for a party that had turned to ash. The perfect night was ruined. The perfect family image was shattered beyond repair. The story of what happened spread through the insulated world of Northwood High and the parent community like wildfire. Someone, probably Brenda, the competitive mom from the prom committee who had always been my mother's rival, had witnessed enough of the drama in the hallway to piece together a juicy narrative. She gleefully recounted it to anyone who would listen. The carefully constructed myth of Eleanor Hart, the perfect, doting mother, was replaced by a new, less flattering one. Eleanor Hart, the woman who stole her older daughter's inheritance to fund a lavish party for her younger one. The social standing she cherished above all else crumbled overnight. My Aunt Carol called me, not to offer support, but to fish for gossip, which I refused to provide. The friends who had filled my mother's Facebook with praise stopped calling her. The invitations to luncheons and charity events dried up. She had paid for her actions, not just with money, but with the one currency she truly valued, public opinion. A few days later, my father called. This time, I saw his name and decided to answer. "Joanna," he said. His voice was different. The usual weary resignation was still there, but it was heavily tinged with something new, genuine shame. I'm sorry. It was the first time in my adult life I had ever heard him apologize for anything related to my mother's behavior. It was always, "That's just how she is," or "Don't upset her." "I'm sorry, Liv," he repeated, his voice cracking slightly. "I should have stood up for you. Years ago. I should have been there at your graduation. There's no excuse. I let things get out of control for a long time because it was easier for me, and you paid the price for my cowardice. I am truly, deeply sorry." I listened to the words I had once longed to hear, words I had fantasized about for years. But now that they had finally come, they didn't bring the rush of healing I once thought they would. They were a bandage on a wound that had already scarred over. They were too little, too late. "I appreciate you saying that, Dad," I said, and I meant it. It took courage for him to finally admit his failure. But an apology can't fix this. It can't erase what happened. I need to move on, for my own sake. "I know," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "Your mother, she's not doing well. She won't leave the house. Chloe's barely speaking to either of us." "That's not my problem anymore," I said, the words coming out without a trace of malice or satisfaction. It was just a statement of fact. I wished them no specific ill will, but I was no longer responsible for their happiness, their problems, or their emotional well-being. My disownment, which my mother had intended as the ultimate punishment, was a liberation I was now fully, gratefully embracing. We ended the call on a quiet, somber note. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a form of closure. He had finally acknowledged his part in my pain, and I had acknowledged that it was no longer enough to make me stay. The door to my old life wasn't just closed, it was locked, bolted, and I was walking away without the key. My new life in Seattle was waiting. 6 months later, I was standing in my new apartment in Seattle. It was twice the size of my old place in Denver, with a huge picture window that looked out over the gray, moody waters of the Puget Sound. The air here smelled of salt and pine and constant, cleansing rain. It smelled like a new beginning. My move had been a blur of cardboard boxes and long stretches of lonely highway, but with every mile I put between me and Denver, I felt physically lighter. I had started my dream job at a top consulting firm, and the work was everything I had hoped it would be. It was challenging, my colleagues were brilliant and supportive, and for the first time in my professional life, I felt truly valued for my mind, not for what I could provide for others. I hammered a final, sturdy nail into the wall above my desk. I carefully hung the framed diploma that had been the catalyst for this whole chain of events, my Master of Organizational Psychology. Seeing it there, in my own space, a space I had earned and paid for myself, filled me with a quiet, profound pride that no amount of external applause ever could. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of my resilience. It was a reminder that I had graduated from more than just a university. I had graduated from a lifetime of being made to feel small, of shrinking myself to fit into the box they had built for me. As I was admiring my handiwork, my laptop pinged with a new email. It was from a name I hadn't seen in years, but one I would never forget: Mr. Chen, the lawyer. The subject line was simply a note from Dr. Reed. Curious, my heart beating a little faster, I opened it. Mr. Chen explained that while sorting through Dr. Reed's old estate files for archiving, he had found a personal, sealed letter addressed to me, with instructions to send it upon the official completion of my master's degree. He had scanned it for me. Inside the email was a PDF of a handwritten note. It was from Evelyn. Her familiar, elegant script filled the page, and I could almost hear her wise, kind voice as I read. The last paragraph stood out to me, and the words seemed to lift off the page. "My dearest Joanna," she wrote, "as you step into your future, remember this: your worth is not determined by the applause of others. Some people, even those you love, will be unable to clap for you, not because you don't deserve it, but because your success shines a light on their own fears and failures. When people can't clap for you, it's because they're not meant to sit in your audience. Find your own stage, build your own theater, and fill the audience with those who will celebrate you, not just tolerate you. You have earned it." Tears streamed down my face as I read her words, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. It was a message from the past, a final piece of guidance from the woman who had seen my potential long before I saw it in myself. She was right. I had spent so long performing on a stage for an audience of 3 who were never, ever going to clap for me. The silence from my family wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of their own limitations. My disownment wasn't a rejection. It was a divine redirection. I looked out my window at the gray water of the Sound, watching a ferry glide silently across the surface. For a long time, I thought silence was surrender. I thought not fighting back, not yelling, not demanding to be seen was a form of weakness. But I was wrong. The silence in my life now wasn't empty. It was peace. It was the quiet, unshakable confidence of knowing my own value. And it was the most beautiful sound in the world. Thank you so much for listening to my entire story. I truly appreciate you. Please comment with the letter A so I know you're one of the special ones who made it all the way to the end. If you have any thoughts you want to share, I'd love to read them. And please feel free to check out the other stories on my channel. Thank you again.